The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday evening. Hope you're all having a great week. Yeah, show title changed a little bit. I need my headphones. I'm going to keep them on. Hope you're all having a great week. We are going to be talking about, we're going to be covering Russell Brand. I know some of you are Russell Brand fans. I don't know why. You'll have to explain it to me sometime. But we're going to be talking about Russell Brand. He puts out a lot of videos. He's become a real celebrity. He has, on YouTube, he has 2.85 million subscribers. 2.85 million subscribers. So, wow, a real intellectual powerhouse or public intellectual powerhouse in the world out there, has a lot of influence. So we're going to take him up on one of his videos. Literally, I could take any one of his videos, and there's a lot to say about any one of his videos because he comes at it from a very, very kind of leftist perspective. So we're going to try to analyze a little bit where he's coming from and how his ideas are affecting the way he looks at the world. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll just do some woke culture stuff. I mean, there's just like a avalanche. It doesn't stop. It's every day now. There's something, I mean, I'm curious to see when this kind of implodes, when it kind of people get so sick and tired of it that they turn against each other, and the whole woke thing kind of implodes and goes away. We will see. We will see. Doctor, what's the doctor? So we're going to talk about that. I do want to talk about the New York Times firing of the science writer for saying the N-word. He just came out with a long kind of 4-part essay on Medium that describes exactly what happened, why he left the New York Times, how the New York Times dealt with it. It's fascinating. It's a fantastic read. So I don't have it open, but I will encourage you all to go read that because it's definitely worth it. It's scary, fascinating to read kind of his description of what happened. He seems like a pretty nice guy and a pretty cool guy. And just read what happened, how the New York Times dealt with it, the kind of the internal politics, and how ultimately he was asked to leave, asked to resign, and did for really the most ridiculous reason, ridiculous reasons. All right, I think the volume was too high there. Okay. What are we going to get started with? Before we do that, don't forget to like the show before you leave. Don't forget, of course, to use the Superchat. The Superchat is a major way of supporting the Yaron Brook Show, and you can do that by clicking on the Superchat button below and then asking a question or just leaving a contribution like Jonathan has and like Stephen has, and a comment like Daniel has, or a question like Michael just did. And I promise to get to all your questions. Of course, the higher dollar amount you put on the question, the more likely it is that I will answer it early. The lower the dollar amount, the later I will be answering it. I try to keep track of all that. I'm not always successful, but I make an attempt at it. And of course, if we go too long, then I might not be able to answer all the questions. But I will give priority to the large dollar denominated questions. Of course, the Super Chat is a way to support the show. A lot of one of the great benefits of supporting the show. I just thought of this today, and I wanted to just share it with you. And then we're going to jump into Russell Brand. One of the great benefits of supporting the show is to show that independent public intellectuals can make a living, even if they're objectivist, even if the audience is relatively limited. But there is a market out there for this kind of content. And while it's great for me that I'm receiving the income that you are providing, it also sends a message out to young objectivist potential intellectuals who would like one day to have a career as an intellectual, that they can do so independently. They can start a Substack, they can go on Twitter and Facebook, and they can do YouTube videos, and that there is an audience out there, i.e. you, and hopefully a growing one. And part of my job, I guess, is to grow that audience, not just for me, but for future objectivist intellectuals, that they can fund themselves. They can have a career being a public intellectual without being on anybody's payroll. And I think that is an important message, because at the end of the day, the way we will win, the way we will have an impact on the world, is when we have 1,000 people like me, or 100 would be good too. Not like me, but doing the kind of stuff that I do, being out there, being engaged in a discussion from all kinds of perspectives, psychologists and philosophers and economists and people who comment on politics and people who comment on culture. And just if we imagine a world in which we had 100, 150, 200 people doing what I do on a regular basis from the perspective of free markets, from the perspective of the philosophy of objectivism, from the perspective of individualism and reason, that's how the world will change. That's one of the major ways. That's one of the most important ways in which the world will change. And in that way, I am showing that it's doable, even without getting a regular paycheck. So thank you. You're showing that it's doable, because you're the ones who are making this possible, who are supporting me and making it possible for me to do this. And I think showing the path for the future. All right, Russell Brand. I don't really know who Russell Brand is. You guys might want to remind me. I mean, he's obviously an actor, comedian. He's familiar. I know I've seen him in movies. Beyond that, I don't know much about him, other than he's got the show. I know he's interviewed people like Peterson and many others who, and he is viewed by thousands. I mean, this video that I'm going to show you was published just a few days ago, and it already has 316,754 views. Now, he does have 2.85 million subscribers, and, put that in perspective, but that's still pretty amazing. That is still pretty amazing. So he is an influencer, a massive influencer, and yet wrong on almost everything he says. So we are going to analyze one of his videos. As I said, we could analyze any one of his videos. A lot of this is repetitive. A lot of this he repeats. He has a thing generally for wealth and billionaires. He's a big kind of proponent of the catastrophic impact of inequality. So we will get into that. All right, so let's bring Russell Brand onto the screen. Alicia said, I loved Russell in Take Him to the Greek and thought he was hysterical. I don't want intellectual advice from the guy. Well, you're going to get it. He used to date Katy Perry. Now, you see, that's funny, because you're assuming I know who Katy Perry is. Like she's a singer, something. I wouldn't be able to sing one of her songs, but okay. Sorry, my popular culture knowledge is pretty bleak. I know, but luckily I don't think you give me Super Chat contributions because of my popular culture abilities, and I'm not singing, right? No way. Brian, thank you. Really appreciate it. Dave, thank you. Dave says, doubt is removed by action. Conor McGregor, or not, right? I mean, that's a dangerous quote. Dangerous quote. It places action above thought. Doubt is removed by thought and action. So you don't act without thinking. Right? Objectivism needs a TMZ. Objectivism needs some singers and artists and people who actually have something to say before we can have a whole channel. KL says Russell Brand equals Jesus 2.0. He certainly has the look. And, you know, I don't want to dwell on this, but what the hell is he wearing? I mean, I get it that he's counterculture. He's trying to be different. He's trying to be special. But what exactly is he wearing? What is up with that? I mean, Woodstock is like, 50 years ago? That is just weird. And that's okay. He's an original, and he can wear what he wants to wear. But I think it's a little weird. Russell Brand did a remake of Arthur. I think I like the original Arthur with Dudley Moore, if I remember right. He plays a drunk. I can't remember what happens in the movie. Ooh, it's a long time ago. But yeah, I like the original. I don't know that I've seen the remake. All right, let's watch this. This is about billionaires going to space. This is about billionaires more broadly. He has multiple, as I said, he has multiple videos about billionaires. He generally dislikes them. And I've you know my defense of billionaires. I'll repeat some of it, but we will go through some of this material. And try to understand where he's coming from. Maybe try to understand, is there anything to what he's saying? And what is the implication? Whoops. I guess I have to unmute him first. Let's unmute him. All right, here we go. Russell Brand.
Billionaires. Their power is growing in the pandemic. They own the present. Are they about to colonize even our future? Let's have a look.
The net worth of American billionaires has soared by $1 trillion since March, according to a new report.
I believe so powerfully in the ability of entrepreneurial capitalism and free markets to solve so many of the world's problems. Not all of them.
It's going well.
So let's start with this $1 trillion increase in wealth of billionaires. I mean, I don't doubt the number. I don't know, whether it counts the market declines of the last few days. But generally, yeah, I mean, they did very well during the pandemic. Particularly, you would say that those billionaires who are tech entrepreneurs, or those billionaires who are heavily invested in technology stocks, did phenomenally well. I want to have to ask ourselves two questions. One is, why did technology stocks do well during COVID? What's the reason? Well, I'd say the main reason is that they provided us with unbelievable values during COVID. That is, even 20 years ago, COVID would have been dramatically worse in terms of its impact on our day-to-day lives, given lockdowns and everything else, without Amazon, without Zoom, without Netflix, without Google, without YouTube, without Apple. Whether it's an Apple TV, or whether it's your iPhone, or it's your iPad, or whether it's your laptop, or whether it's the apps. Technology stocks went up by $1 trillion, or many of these billionaires added $1 trillion to their net worth, to a large extent because the companies that they run, the companies that they own, changed our lives by well more than $1 trillion worth just during the pandemic. If you think about, again, what life would have been like without these, and the fact that all of this is accessible not just to us relatively rich Americans, but is available to everybody in the world, is available to every American. Almost every American uses these products, and their lives are significantly better for it. So they made $1 trillion because they added value. And Jeff Bezos is absolutely right. Whatever problems we have, and we're clearly going to disagree with Russell Brand on what those problems are, whatever problems we have, The solution is going to come from the ingenuity, from the thinking, from the entrepreneurial activity of entrepreneurs. There's nowhere else you're going to solve any problem, even the kind of little bit of crazy problems that I think the left thinks we have. So let's keep listening to Russell.
Well,
Not all of them, but so many of them.
of course, people talk about, progress. They'll point to medieval France or something and like someone coughing up a lump of plague in a public square. Of course, entrepreneurial capitalism has provided many things, but I think...
Really, Russell? I mean, you don't have to go to the Middle Ages France to see people dying of disease, dying of poverty, dying of hunger, just being poor, just not having anything or having very little. You can travel to basically any non-capitalist country in the world today, and it looks like rural France of 300 years ago. Of course, I don't know why you're using France and not England, but anyway. Volume is too high. Is it too high? Is my volume too high, or is Russell Brand volume too high? I can adjust either one. You guys need to tell me which one is too high. His, I guess. They're saying YouTube. Okay, I'm going to change the volume, and hopefully that'll be lower. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. It's hard for me to keep track of it here. Everywhere where capitalism is tried, to the extent that it is tried, and it's never been tried perfectly, completely, purely, but to the extent that it is tried, in other words, to the extent that we respect rights, to the extent that we have free markets, to the extent that we allow for property rights, to the extent that we have institutions to protect property rights, to the extent that we allow entrepreneurs to keep the product of their success, of their production, to that extent you have wealth in society, in which even poor people don't live like average people in places that haven't tried even a little bit of capitalism. So let's not necessarily have to go to 300 years ago in France, but of course it is true that 300 years ago, 95% of all the world population, not just in rural France, life expectancy was around 30 or 39 in the best countries, but under 30 in the worst. That most people lived, 90+% of people lived in $2 a day or less. That was everybody's life, not some particularly poor peasant in the middle of nowhere that Russell Brand had to pick out. That was life. And that was life not just 300 years ago, but that was life pretty much throughout human history. So instead of being curious, as every human being on this planet should be, but what changed? What happened? How do we get from 300 years ago to today, where Russell Brand can sit in wearing ridiculous clothes, but with a nice clip-on microphone and some high-quality digital cameras and broadcast on a platform called YouTube, from the comfort of his home to the comfort of my home? How do we get from there to here? That's the question people should be asking. That is the most interesting, important question one can ask if one's interested in progress and in human success and history. No period in human history is more interesting, more important than that period where we transitioned from life expectancy of in the 30s and poverty of $2 a day and everything else. That transition from that to where we are today, that period, the Enlightenment and into the 19th century, that's the most exciting period in all of human history. Nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to care. So, yes, Russell, we use that example because capitalism is this unbelievable success. Now, he's going to tell us what capitalism's failures are. And, of course, the failure is always the same. There's only one. They always raise it. They have to raise it. In a sense, they have to create the problem so that they have something to attack capitalism with, because it's so successful, even in improving the lot of the poor, that they have to come up with something new, in order to go after capitalism. And this has been the thing that the left has chosen to go after capitalism for the last 40, 50 years. It's always the same thing.
Sometimes that we deify it because we don't look at the cost, because sometimes the costs are harder to evaluate.
So what are the costs, guys? What are the costs? Inequality? No, because I mean, he'll say inequality, we'll get to that, but inequality is not the main cost, because he realizes that that's a trap. Is, you know, everybody's better off. Yes, the gap might have increased, but everybody's better off. So it can't be inequality. So what is it?
Billionaires have carbon footprints that are thousands of times.
Yeah, it's carbon footprint. It's carbon footprint. The cost is climate change. That's the cost.
Higher than those of average Americans. They own yachts, planes, multiple mansions, all of which contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Here's an interest.
By the way, that can't be true. That billionaires have thousand times a greater carbon footprint than ordinary people. It's just not true. It's impossible. Think about it. And this relates to another aspect of inequality that you know, I think is important to note in the modern world. What determines your carbon footprint? I mean, the whole concept is disgusting, but what determines your carbon footprint? Well, basically what you eat, because a lot of carbon is emitted by the cows we eat. It's the electricity you use in your home, the fuel you use to fuel your car, the fuel the airplane uses when you fly, the fuel you have on your yacht or whatever. So let's think about the difference in consumption of those kind of things, and generally, by the way, consumption, right? Every time you buy something made of plastic, every time you buy anything, there's some carbon footprint of that product that you bought. But how much different is your consumption from a billionaire's consumption? I mean, breathing, yes, it's important to note that breathing, of course, increases your carbon footprint. The less you breathe, the less carbon you emit. You should try not breathing for a while. But what's the difference? I mean, the major difference is, I mean, we all drive cars. Billionaires probably drive electric cars, so they probably have a smaller carbon footprint. We all have homes. Their homes are bigger, but not thousands of times bigger. I mean, maybe Bill Gates' home is 10,000 square feet, or maybe 20,000 square feet. But mine is like 4. So he's 5 times bigger, if that, right? His yacht, I don't have a yacht. But how often does he go on the yacht? How often is the yacht engine really running? I don't think that's thousands. What else? Out the private plane. Now, I fly a lot. My guess is I fly more than some billionaires. Now, it's true, you can divide my carbon footprint across 300 people who are on the plane with me. But I also fly more, probably not 300 times more. Okay, so the billionaire's carbon footprint from flying is probably higher than even mine, even though I fly so much. But okay, it's not thousands of times more. There's no way that would be true. So where is it? They eat more hamburgers? I know Bill Gates really likes hamburgers. Do they eat more hamburgers? Maybe, but not by thousands. And I eat meat. I just don't, I don't think they eat more steaks than I do. Or lamb. So what are we talking about? Whose quote is that from? This nonsensical quote? Does it say? It says from the conversation. Like who? Private planes, mansions, and super yachts. 1,000 times? It's just not true. It's just, and this is the thing about this, that most people look at this and say, that makes sense. I mean, I was even tempted to say, okay. I mean, I don't care, but okay. But no, it's just false. It's just a lie. But this is the thing in our culture. If you repeat the lie over and over again, if you use social media to repeat the lie over and over again, then everybody starts believing it. And it's just, yeah, well, of course. Billionaires have a carbon footprint thousands of times higher than that. I mean, yeah.
Multiple mansions, all of which contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Here's an interesting quote from Evgeny Morozov, the author. He says, Silicon Valley is a bizarre mix of greedy capitalists and cultural marketers.
That is true. That is kind of bizarre.
Keen on indoctrinating their users into left-wing ideas while getting filthy rich off everyone's data. And also,
well, as if all they do is get rich off of data, right? Apple doesn't make stuff. It just gets rich off of our data. Facebook gets rich off of our data, but not directly. It gets rich off of off of advertising to us, using our data to advertise to us. The same with Google. It's not that they're using the data for some nefarious means other than to sell us stuff, which we don't have to buy. By the way, you do have free will. You can afford it. Bill Gates' house is 66,000 square feet. Okay, so if mine is 4,000, then his is 15 times my. Okay, 15 times. Still not thousands. Still not thousands. Are there any self-made female billionaires? Yes. Yes, I knew one. Her name was Darla Moore. And there are others. The Oprah, of course. Oprah is a billionaire. But there are others. I think Carly Fiorina, whether she's a billionaire or just a centimillionaire. The same with the other woman who ran for the Senate in California. Might be only a centimillionaire, not a billionaire. But there are a number of very wealthy. Oh, of course, the other female billionaires are the daughters of Sam Walton. The daughters of Sam Walton, the Queen of England, yes, but she doesn't count really. But the daughters of Sam Walton, J.K. Rowling is a female billionaire. So yes, quite a few female billionaires. And many of them self-made. So some of them inherited, like Walton and the Queen of England, but some of them self-made, like J.K. Rowling, and some of them self-made in technology. All right, so let's keep going.
Further to the start of this video, US billionaires' wealth has risen by over $1 trillion during the pandemic. A report by Oxfam concluded that Jeff Bezos' worth had climbed so much between March and September 2020 that he could have given all 876,000 Amazon employees a $105,000 bonus and still have been as wealthy as he was before the pandemic.
A couple of things on that. First,
mental. Every single one of eight. That's not even a few employees. 876. All them people dropping stuff off to your house in a van could have given them 105 grand each, and still been as. It would have made no difference.
Look how outraged he is, and again, notice that in the culture we live in, his outrage, everybody's going to be sympathetic to it. Nobody's going to say, "No, why should he give that money away?" Almost everybody's going to say, "Yeah, that's right," because we're conditioned by altruism to, well, they don't have the money. He has the money. Why shouldn't he give it to them? And he's no worse off by our standards. Maybe by his standards he is. I wonder, what do you think? I wonder, maybe we can pose this question to Russell. If Jeff Bezos tomorrow lost all their money in the stock market because maybe the market realizes maybe there's a bubble in tech stocks. That was the other reason tech might have increased by $1 trillion. Maybe there's a bubble there. Maybe all the stimulus money has gone into fueling a bubble in tech stocks. I don't know. Maybe it's a possibility. I'm not giving you financial advice. It's just possible. But let's assume that happened and Amazon stock collapses and Jeff Bezos loses $100 billion. Do you think Russell would advocate for the employees giving that money back? Do you think he'd support that? Do you think he'd support, every time the stock price of Amazon goes down, that we all do it like a day of mourning, a moment of contemplation for the pain that the Silicon Valley guys? I mean, these people lose because it's all in the stock, right? It's all stock price. It's not like Jeff Bezos has a mountain of cash somewhere with $200 billion. It's all in the stock. It goes up, it goes down. Mostly it's from creating value in the company. He couldn't sell all that anyway.
Top 100 landowners.
Notice how altruistic this is. It only goes one way. And how, I mean, the reason somebody like Russell Brand has so many subscribers, he's entertaining, he's funny, he's very animated, he's morally outraged, he has a moral perspective, but he's conventional. He's completely and utterly conventional. We'll get to some of the, if we get there, I don't know if we're going to be able to do a whole 13 minutes of his thing, but he plays off of exactly what people would expect, right? He plays off of altruism. He says something like, why didn't, and everybody goes, yay! Yeah, we agree, absolutely. There's nothing controversial or questionable, except to me, except to a individualist, an egoist, a capitalist.
Grand each, and still bidders, it would have made no difference.
If you look at the top 100 landowners in America, they now own 33 million acres. That's according to the Land Report 100. That's up 18% since 2008. And some of the names on this list may surprise you. Jeff Bezos is actually the 25th biggest landowner in the U.S.
We've talked to you before about...
So they own a lot of land. Why do they own a lot of land? Why have they increased their land ownership by so much since 2008? Anybody know? Anybody out there listening know what land is a hedge against? What is land a hedge against? Well, what would you buy land if you were worried about what? Well, generally, I could wait for an answer. Anybody on the chat? Anybody want to guess what you're hedging? Why you're buying land? Is it a hedge against? Well, it's food shortages, certainly, but EPA 1875 is absolutely right, as is Daniel, as is Mitch, as is Alan. All of us know this. I guess Russell doesn't. Might want to take a finance class, Russell. It's a hedge against inflation. And there's a reason why since 2008, a lot of people are being worried about inflation as the government prints more and more and more money, as inflation looks like it might be more possible. It's also a hedge against ultimate collapse, the food shortages, and farmland goes up in times like that. Of course, then there's also no real, there's nobody to buy the land from you. But it's a hedge against inflation. And that's why a lot of billionaires right now are buying land. So why is this somehow nefarious? And by the way, 33 whatever million acres, I mean, how much of that of the United States is that? It's still true that the federal government and state, local governments own 75% of all the land west of the Mississippi. 75% of all the land west of the Mississippi is owned by government. 75%. And we're worried about a few billionaires buying a few ranches? Give me a break. And Bill Gates is the 25th largest landowner in the United States. Who cares? Why is that even making news? Why is that relevant?
Farmland ownership with billionaires, notably, of course, Bill Gates, but also Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. He owns 420,000 acres of land, mainly in West Texas. So they own cyber...
In West Texas. Have you ever been to West Texas? 425,000 acres in West Texas? I wonder how many of you have ever driven through West Texas. Why would anybody own 425,000 acres in West Texas? What's he hoping for? The only justification for that. I mean, there are two possibilities. Only two possibilities, as far as I can tell. One is that he plans to use that. I mean, West Texas is desert. It's just desert. There's nothing there. Nothing except oil. So one possibility is he's bought it in order to get oil rights. I don't think there's gold. But the other possibility is that it would make a great place to launch rockets from. So it could very well be the place in which he's going to build a launch site for his rockets. Who knows? I don't know. But there's nothing you can grow in West Texas. It's not farmland. It's oil. It might be sand for fracking. There are a bunch of things that West Texas have that are not typical what you would invest in. But why does anybody care? Why does anybody care? Yeah, it drives the small farmer crazy because they bid up the price of land to where they can't expand. Yeah, so, but what's the alternative to expanding for the small farmer? They can sell and make a fortune. And indeed, a lot of farmers have sold at prices they could have never imagined they would get. So, two sides of this, right? All right, let's keep going.
Base, they own the land that we stand upon. Now,
No, they don't. You don't stand upon land in West Texas. And my guess is you own your own place in London, which costs a fortune, by the way, because London's one of the most expensive cities in the world. But no, they don't own the land in which we stand on.
space itself, the final frontier, is about to become just another item in their portfolio.
It is potentially the next giant leap in private space travel. SpaceX has announced it's sending a Japanese billionaire up around the moon.
I hope they've told him first. We're sending a Japanese billionaire out around the moon. What's going on? I'm trying to have my breakfast.
Yusaku Maezawa. His pockets deep enough, deep as the moon is high above the earth, and that's what it's going to take, really, to get there.
It's being jauntily reported, but we're living in a time of massive inequality, suffering and poverty and frustration, not just, of course, in places like India, where the farming protests are destabilizing the country, or at least challenging authority about the way that the country is organized, but in countries where it was taken for granted that we had a stable way of life.
So now the volume's too low? Is it? I don't know. Wanda Freeman, you have to be explicit. Volume, that mean up? All right, we'll increase it. All right, inequality. We're sending a billionaire up into the moon. And we've got inequality right here on Earth. In India, there are people who are poor. Lower is good. Man, Russell Brand is that loud. How is this just? How is it just to send a billionaire around the moon while people are starving? Well, what in the end prevents people from starving? How do we take a population of 8 billion people around the world and get them to where we'd like them to be, the equivalent of middle class? How does that happen? How does that happen? Well, how has it happened in the past? How did we get from 300 years ago France to today? How did we get from 30% of the world population 40 years ago living on $2 a day or less to only 8% of the world population living on $2 a day or less today? Did any of that require taking money from billionaires and handing it out to other people? Was any of it achieved through charity, through taxation, through redistribution of wealth? The answer is no. Whatever success we have had in the world in eradicating extreme poverty, it was caused by jobs, by entrepreneurship, by freeing up economies, by allowing and defining private property, by unleashing the capitalist forces. And is it just the capitalist forces, I don't know, in farming or in... No, it's pushing the envelope of human progress. It's advancing into the future. That creates jobs. Sending this guy around the moon, which SpaceX is committed to doing, is going to require massive amounts of work from probably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. From the mining of raw materials, to the generation of jet fuel, to the production of the particular materials that you need in order to create the rocket, to chip manufacturers around the world, most of them are not in America, to software writing, to a wide variety of people who are going to get employed by this one rocket that is going to take this guy around the moon. And of course, all those people, you might say, well, they're the higher earner. But those higher earners are now making more money. And once they make more money, what can they do with that money? They go and spend it. They go to restaurants. They buy toys for their kids. They buy all kinds of stuff. They buy shoes. They buy clothes. So by sending somebody to Mars, you're actually helping raise people out of poverty. Indeed, you're actually engaging in the activity, the only activity that raises people out of poverty. And my guess is there was somebody, some Russell Brand of his time, who in the early part of the 20th century was going, why is this Ford guy building this automobile thing? I mean, horse and buggies are good enough. Why do we need automobiles? And he's going to cause unemployment in those buggy factories. And what about the poor? I mean, Henry Ford is rich enough, or the other. What does he need another car for? Why can't he just help all those poor people in India, who, by the way, were poorer back then than they are today? Partially because India's adopted a little bit of free markets, right? So, one that says Russell has no real life experience. Maybe that's true, but this is not his lack of life experience, because this is just him buying in to an economic explanation of the world and a moral perspective on the world that is indeed detached from reality, but not because of a lack of experience, but because it is a philosophy, an ideology that is detached from reality. And then, of course, what about all the new technological innovation that SpaceX is going to have to produce, that is then going to be used in all kinds of other areas, which is create all other new industries, and then new industries being created every day. I just read about flying cars, flying taxis. They're going to shuttle people around. Big investment just made by a SPAC. We won't get into what a SPAC is, but anyway. What do you gain by putting down the billionaire? By putting down his ability to fly? It's not like he's burning his money, even though he has every right to do it. That money is being paid to SpaceX, which is paying suppliers and engineers and people. It's not like the money's gone. Indeed, it's circulating in the economy for productive activities. Productive activities that are pushing our knowledge, pushing our technology, pushing our productive capacity further into the future, making us all richer. All of us. Well, those of us who want to be part of a productive economy.
Poverty, doubt and uncertainty. So I suppose I can't share in the kind of jauntily, there's a billionaire being flown around the moon.
We continue to be captivated by space.
Yeah. Look at who else is out there. We got Virgin Galactic by Richard Branson. We also have Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos from Amazon fame. So this is really heating up.
This is interesting.
This is what's amazing to me, right? What's amazing to me is that here we go have billionaires who have created so much wealth for themselves that they can now, if you will, indulge in a hobby that is going to propel man into the stars. If we build a colony on Mars, it's going to be because of Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos. It won't be because of politicians. And these are the same guys, the same capitalist system that is accused constantly of being short-term. And yet here they are building businesses that won't really generate significant profits for decades, that won't achieve their goal. If I think Bezos, it's creating colony on the moon. For Musk, it's going to Mars. For decades. They won't achieve their goal for decades. This is long-term thinking. This is individuals moving mankind forward into the final frontier. I think it's a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing. Not Richard Branson. Not in the age we live in. Not in the age of envy. Not in an age of altruism. I mean, he hates these guys. And he hates them for their virtues.
So on one hand, you have a future for a few institutions and people that is literally opening up the cosmos, where elsewhere we're seeing dereliction, decimation, destruction and suffering.
Really, think about it this way. Has the internet opened up the future for billions of people? Has the internet decimated them or opened up that future? Has the iPhone empowered billions of people around the world? You should ask entrepreneurs in Africa who use the iPhone not only to figure out prices and to design and monitor supply chains and monitor their crops and whatever it is that they're doing. All over the world, people are creating wealth off of this and off of Google and off of the internet and off of all this infrastructure that these billionaires dare to design. And just imagine what's going to happen in the future. One of the things that SpaceX is doing, I think I talked about this on a show in the past, is they're putting up thousands and thousands of satellites. And these satellites are going to be in low orbit all around the world and going to be able to basically provide high-speed, gigabyte internet to every human being on planet Earth who has a device connected to it. I mean, that'll change the world in deep, fundamental ways. And we should condemn these guys for it? I mean, the poor in the world should celebrate SpaceX, should celebrate Blue Origin. It's creating a future for them. Their standard of living is likely to rise much faster than everybody else's. And from a level that no human being should live at, not in the modern era. No human being should be living at $2 a day or less. No human being should be living on $10 a day or less. And if they'd only adopt freedom and give it the time and embrace Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all these guys, you know, and Jeff Bezos, they wouldn't be poor.
Shaw said, a majority of compelling and visible ideas about tomorrow are being conceived and developed by a tiny minority of ultra-wealthy individuals and private sector companies.
But who ever conceives and develops ideas for tomorrow? Who pushes the envelope towards tomorrow? Now, I know people like Russell Bland would like it to be politicians, doing it for the common good and the public interest. But that's not what happened. That's not what happens. Anyway, did politicians invent the internal combustion engine? Did politicians invent flight? Did politicians facilitate any of that? It's stunning what offends them. Notice what offends them. What offends them is that some incredible, smart, hardworking individuals are using their own money to shape the future. I can't think of a more beautiful thing.
It's not hard to see the seductive appeal of these visions of the future. Beautiful digital renderings invite us into glowing and highly conceptual worlds, such as Elon Musk and SpaceX's plan to build a glass-domed colony on Mars, or Jeff Bezos' plan for floating space colonies. On Earth, Richard Branson's Virgin Hyperloop One has worked with top architects around the world to produce spectacular, inspiring images of a world connected by zero emissions, 670-mile-per-hour vacuum-propelled pods, Uber imagining self-flying taxis.
These are beautiful things. And yet, they want you to be cynical about them.
In a sense, a continuation of the ideology that's got us into this mess in the first place, that by using the mindset of capitalism, and no doubt that...
Notice he has to apologize. Every time he attacks capitalism, he has to say, no doubt, there's some good things about it. It should tell you something, Russell, that you have to say that.
It's brought about excellence, entrepreneurialism, and ingenuity in many areas. But in the extreme form that we're experiencing it,
we have extreme capitalism today, guys. Did you know that? We have extreme freedom. They're not regulated. They're not taxed. They can do whatever they want. They don't have to ask for permission. We have extreme capitalism in the world today. Where do these people live? What conception of the world do they have?
it creates a lot of problems.
What problems? You still, other than carbon footprint, I haven't heard a single problem.
Focus to potential space colonization for me seems like it's compounding the negligence and lack of awareness that we're currently suffering from, toiling under. What I feel we ought
And any of those a result of capitalism? Really?
be focusing on is how do we create a fairer, more just society here on Earth.
See, that's it. It's fair and justice. And what is fair and justice for Russell Brand and the entire left? Fairness and justice is, we've talked about this over and over and over again, equality. It's about his egalitarian vision. It's about knocking down the billionaires to everybody else's level. It's about helping the poorest of the poor at the expense of those who have. It's about the need as the primary moral commandment. What drives Russell, what drives the left and the right, this is why we're in this mess, is altruism and egalitarianism. Fairness and justice is always egalitarianism. And it is the most horrible idea in all of human history. The most horrific idea. We are not equal in outcome, in abilities, in production. And it's not just that we be equal. It's just that we all get what we produce. It's worse than Marxism. You do Marx an injustice by calling this Marxism. Marx wouldn't completely recognize this.
Rather than, should we get a dome up on Mars that can have some poor sods from Indonesia working on it while a few people live it up drinking cocktails in a literal glass bubble?
Think we'll ever have Amazon fulfillment centers on the moon?
That's a very good question.
I feel that's too much power there, Jeff Bezos.
Why? Why wouldn't we? What's the difference? What's the difference between Amazon fulfillment centers and the moon? Why is that an issue? I mean, who cares? Why do you care? Why does anybody care? I mean, more jobs, right? How do you get Amazon fulfillment centers on the moon? There's going to be high-paying jobs on the moon for people who are willing to go up there and work at those fulfillment centers.
It's time to go back to the moon, this time to stay.
I can't think of any experience that anyone's going to have in their life that will be more wonderful, extreme than going to space.
Accessibility to space tourism remains limited to the richest of the rich, with ticket prices ranging from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions.
Also, I suppose
But this is the thing, and this will be my last point because, we could go on like this with every one of his videos, and I've already gone an hour on this and covered only 5 minutes and 55 seconds. But this is the thing. First adopters always pay more. Ultimately, if we're successful in opening up the final frontier, in opening up space, everybody will be able to go. The first people who flew on airplanes and commercial airplanes from Europe to the United States paid a fortune. Paid a fortune. They were the first adopters. And over time, as airplane companies got bigger, as demand increased, as competition increased, prices dropped. The first people who used cell phones, you remember those big brick cell phones? Paid a fortune. The first people who owned an automobile paid a fortune. Yes, the first people who are going to space are going to pay a fortune. And thus, make it possible for us all to go into space. Thus, they're going to open up an entire world for all of us. They're going to fund the development of cheaper and cheaper ways to get to space. They're going to fund the design of larger spacecraft that can go further. They can take more people. They can ultimately take people from all walks of life to colonize space. Now, that is an amazing thing that cannot happen otherwise. Now, if you think that the government can do it, yes, they put a man on the moon, but then they couldn't do anything with the moon. Yes, you could argue that the government built the infrastructure that made the internet possible, but they didn't do anything with the infrastructure. You need markets. You need competition. You need cooperation. You need innovation. You need connectivity. You need people working hard to solve a problem. You need to allow the freedom for people to be innovative, to think outside the box, to create new stuff, and then to sell it for a high price. And that money goes in and gets invested in designing new products that ultimately will make it all cheaper. That's how the world works, or that's how progress works. One of the reasons we're stagnating in many industries is because we've not allowed for that process to work, because we've regulated, taxed, restricted, made fun of, banned certain activities. Right? Now, I've got, I think Richard is asking I should talk more about inequality. I've got whole lectures on inequality. You can find them online, the causes of human inequality are between individuals, ability and focus. It's what you do. It's what nature has given you and what you do with it. Those are the two determinants. Yeah, the environment in which you're raised has some impact, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is what you do with it. The focus you bring, the energy you bring, the hard work you bring. But mainly it's the focus, the mental energy, the seriousness with which you take your life, with which you take whatever project you're working on. That results in inequality. Inequality of in intellectual pursuits, inequality of some people making better movies than other people, and inequality of wealth, which is just one of the many inequalities that exists out there. And I encourage you to go listen to the Yaron Brook lectures on inequality. And of course, I have a book with Don Watkins. It's right, oops, what's it doing? It's right there. It's called Equal is Unfair. It's available on Amazon. Oh, evil Amazon. Maybe you should buy it on Barnes & Noble or something. But it's available on Amazon, and so feel free to buy it and read it and talk about it. Right? Richard says, social and economic mobility has decreased markedly over the last few decades. Maybe. There's a lot of questions about the research. But even if that's true, yeah. But why? What's true also of the last few decades? What's true about the last few decades is that government intervention, welfare, redistribution of wealth, regulations have all increased. So maybe there's a connection between our attempts to reduce inequality and lower mobility. And we show that in the book. You want more mobility? You need more freedom. Whoops, the book just fell. Stay. Primacy of consciousness when you start talking to books. You want more social mobility? You want the poor to get richer? More freedom, more capitalism, less redistribution of wealth, less taxation. Jennifer asks, how come these types never give it all away and go live in a tent? Well, it kind of looks like Russell Brand dresses in clothes that belong in a tent, although my guess is they're made by designers and cost a fortune. But I'm not sure. Why don't they give it all away? Because they rationalize it to themselves. Well, that wouldn't make a big dent in the world. I'm more valuable having the comfort and the time to contemplate ideas and to do YouTube videos and to change the world. Yeah, they believe, and they're right, that they will have more impact on the world by advocating for these ideas than by giving it all up. Oh my God, I made Jennifer laugh. People don't usually laugh. All right, let's see. I'm just quickly looking to see if there's anything here that's related. Not really. No $20 questions other than Jennifer's. Where are my guys? All right, so these questions are going to have to wait till the end of the show. I was going to do $20 questions, but there are no $20 questions. I don't know what's happened. Everybody spent their Super Chat pocket money on the weekends, so we've got some $5 and $10 questions. I'll get to them in a little while, but unless somebody jumps in right now. Yeah, still not a $20 question, so still going to be just delayed until later. Let me just pull up this one article that I wanted to recommend to you guys because it is important. Let's see. Whoops, I'll find it. One second. All right, so I want to recommend to you that you look this guy up. His name is, if you're interested in the woke stuff, if you're interested in what's going on in the New York Times, if you're interested in how it all kind of works, I highly recommend this guy, Donald G. McNeil. Donald G. McNeil was the guy who was basically asked to leave the New York Times a few weeks ago because of a comment he made a couple of years ago in discussing some issues with some kids. He made a comment, the N-word came up. There was an issue of whether this girl who had said the N-word when she was 12 on a video, should she 4 years later have been penalized by the school? And the kids were asking him, and he asked, well, in what context did she say the N-word? And in saying in what context did she say the N-word, he said the N-word. Now, the New York Times has published the N-word many times in recent history when discussing it in a relevant context. Now, it turns out that wasn't the only thing he was asked to leave for. He was with a group of young people, and he made all kinds of claims that they were just horrified by. Just horrified by. Claims about climate change. He's actually got a semi-rational view of climate change. It's like, yeah, it's probably not catastrophic, and if it is catastrophic, then, if it really gets bad, then, yeah, people will have to evacuate New York and maybe Miami, but they'll build cities somewhere else, and not that many people are going to die, and we're pretty rich, so, we'll cope and we'll survive. And, yeah, Southern California might see a plummeting in agricultural output because it'll be too hot and there won't be enough rain. But you know what? There'll actually be farmland in Canada and in Russia where land that typically is frozen will now be available to farm. So on net, will we have less farmland or more? Why would you think that? So he had a relatively rational view of but not politically incorrect in the sense of saying, no, it's all wrong. Oh, Jack, thank you. That is very generous. Really appreciate that. He doesn't say that. He's like, yeah, okay. And they were like really upset. And then they said, but don't you realize that the poor suffer disproportionately when things like this happen? And he says, yeah, the poor suffer disproportionately when pretty much anything happens. It sucks being poor. Charlie asked a $20 question. How did I miss that? I saw you gave $20, but it wasn't a question. It was a thank you for your work. And thank you, Charlie, for that. But if there was a question associated with it, I missed it. So I apologize for not thanking you when you made the contribution, but I didn't see the question. So ask it now, just in the chat, if there actually was a question associated with that. Let's see. And so he wrote 4 blog posts on Medium, on medium.com, describing exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. Just write it again here. I don't know what happened, that I missed it. And I can't go back. I can't scroll back. It won't let me scroll all the way to the beginning of the show. So just, if you can type it in the chat, just saying what the question was, then even if it's just, because I might have copied it over but forgot to note that it was a $20 one. So I highly recommend reading what he wrote. I don't want to just, it gives you a scary view of young people. Now, these are young people all going to top schools, boarding schools. These are all young people going to, from wealthy families, paid a lot of money to be on this tour in Peru, where he was one of the lecturers. I mean, he seems to me like a cool guy. He's the health reporter for the Times, and seems like a good guy, somebody who at least to some extent got the COVID pandemic, at least early on, knew it was bad, and so on. So he got some of the data right. But just an interesting guy, and the New York Times just let him go after an unbelievable career, 40 years with the paper. A phenomenal career. An incredibly successful career. Up for a Pulitzer Prize, I think, for his reporting on the corona. And yet, he got asked to resign because of some spoiled kids got upset because some of his views were not as woke as what they've been taught at university. And he describes some things, just unbelievable stuff that these kids came up with in terms of distorting and perverting what he says he actually said and what they're claiming he said. So anybody interested, Donald G. McNeil, it's basically Donald G. McNeil, Jr. Jr. 1954.medium.com. I'll put it on the notes at the bottom of the show. After the show, I'll add it. But I highly recommend reading the 4 blog posts. It'll scare the bejesus out of you. All right. Yeah, I still don't see. I asked the 20. Looking for Shelly's question. Just write it in the chat, and then I'll be able to answer it. All right. So I wanted to just mention that. I wanted you to read that. And then I just wanted to give you an update about the latest woke nuttiness, craziness. Here's a few just in the last few days, right? Just a few. And I'm reading this. This is an article in Commentary Magazine that summarizes some of these. The online, Amazon, you know Amazon. Amazon found it necessary to redesign its smartphone app logo. The company's signature upward-oriented arrow in the shape of a smile over a box with a jagged cut piece of blue tape over the top. So I think you probably know what that is, right? So you've probably seen it. So why do you think they had to redesign it? All right, I see the question. Is this the question? I assume this was the question that was $20. I see the question now. I did copy it over, but forgot to mark it as a $20 question. So I'll get to it in a minute. What do you think was about Amazon's logo that upset people? Well, it sounds like a number of people complained that it looked like Hitler. I'm not kidding. The Amazon logo, smartphone app logo, supposedly looked like Hitler, so they actually redesigned it. I don't get that one. I've been trying. I'm going to try later to look for the logo and try to figure it out. But that's like nuts, all right? Now, why couldn't Amazon just say, "That's not nuts, people. You guys are stupid. Just go away"? No, it redesigned it. All right, Hyatt, the hotel, which hosted the Conservative Political Action Conference over this last weekend, where Trump gave a speech, and I showed you a bit of Josh Hawley's speech the other day. Hyatt has been condemned. Because the stage on which the speakers appeared looked suspiciously like a Norse rune. I think that's how you pronounce it. Favored by the Nazi regimes. I mean, people are seeing Nazis everywhere. And Hyatt, of course, designed the stage and put the stage together. I guess the Republican Party had something, or the Conservative Political Action Committee conference had something to do with the design, but really? Who comes up with this stuff? All right. The Syracuse University's women's lacrosse team offered a public apology after a student posted to the team's Instagram account featuring a player making the okay gesture. I think this is okay. I think that's the gesture. The lacrosse team acknowledged that the gesture is now, quote, interpreted by some as white supremacy sign. Really? And those who interpreted it this way were justifiably offended and upset. Why is it justifiable? When it's clear that it was a symbol of okay. This is insane. And then I heard today that 6 of Dr. Seuss's books, 6, will not be published anymore because they have racist images in them. Dr. Seuss? I mean, maybe. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember any racist images in the books. I loved the Dr. Seuss books. Some of them are amazing. Amazing. The Places You'll Go is one of the best books ever. If you've never read The Places You'll Go, Dr. Seuss's The Places You Go, it's just got the right sense of life about it. It's got this section about waiting and how awful waiting is and how horrible waiting is. It's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. I don't know. I mean, maybe there is some racist Dr. Seuss stuff. You could edit it out. You don't have to, I guess. But I'm on the cancel list. I'm waiting to be canceled. I think it would be great publicity if I get canceled. Nobody's canceled me. I'm really not happy about it. Oh, The Places You'll Go. I love Oh, The Places You'll Go. One of my favorite books, certainly one of my favorite books to read to my kids, ever. All right, So that's kind of woke culture, the latest, right? And notice the cowardice of the New York Times, which knew the details of what happened 2 years ago and decided after intense internal investigation, which you can read about in these essays, that it was not an offense that he should be fired for or penalized for. And yet, because of a news story at some other publication, whose name I won't mention, the newsroom, particularly minorities in the newsroom, were so offended, not caring about whether the accusations about this guy were true or not, that he got fired because he was told that he'd lost the newsroom. Not that he did anything wrong. Not that he did anything bad. Not that he was a bad person or a racist or anything. But that some people in the newsroom were offended. And therefore he needed to pay the price. Their offense, their emotional upset at lies about him meant that he needed to be sacrificed on the altar of political correctness and woke culture. Just disgusting. Why doesn't Syracuse? Why doesn't Amazon? Why doesn't Hyatt Hotels stand up to these bastards? Because if you stand up to them, you're called a racist. Nobody questions. Nobody challenges. That's part of what is so evil. That's part of what is so evil about what's happening in the New York Times, because the New York Times is modeling this. It's enough that people accuse you of being a racist, and that some people emotionally suspect maybe there's some truth to it. That's enough. So everybody folds. Everybody gives in. Nobody will say a word. Yeah. So we need to stop this. It's ridiculous. And the way they're using the word racism, it means nothing anymore. If you can throw racist at anybody, it empties the concept of all meaning. So when I call somebody a racist, it doesn't really mean anything. Because if I'm using it in the same sense as these other people's are. So, it truly is horrific. And what is truly missing here is balls, courage, somebody having the courage to stand up to this. Now, I want to give you one more example of the insanity going on in the world right now. This one's about critical race theory. And here there's a lawsuit brought against these people. This is in Nevada, in a school in Nevada, high school in Nevada. And the lawsuit that's being brought, again, from a story in Commentary magazine, the lawsuit is brought by a widowed black mom in Nevada on behalf of her mixed race child. Son. I don't know why. Son. Right. And the reason is that she has found offensive the public school's recent overhaul of its curriculum to incorporate intersectionality, which I've talked about on a couple of shows in the past, and critical race theory into the materials. And that the materials were not descriptive or informative, but normative and prescriptive. And they required the students to unlearn and fight back against, quote, oppressive structures. That some racial, sexual, gender, and religious identities once revealed are officially singled out in the programming as inherently problematic and assigned pejorative moral attributes. Now notice, this is brought by a mixed race child. You think a mixed race child would be a good guy in the intersectionality world. But no, they're oppressors because they have, I guess, a little bit of white in them. The lawsuit describes how one teacher greeted the boys' class with, "Hello, my wonderful social justice warriors." This is in school. And then she asked each student to label and identify their gender, race, and religious identities as part of an independent reflection exercise, which was graded. Students were told to determine what part of your identity has privilege or oppression attached to it. So they're supposed to rank themselves in this intersectionality world. Privilege is defined, they define privilege as inherent belief in the inferiority of oppressed groups. Now that's great, because if that's a definition of privilege, then I'm glad to tell you I'm not privileged, because I don't believe there's an inherent I have an inherent belief in the inferiority of oppressed groups, so I'm not privileged. Of course, the oppressed groups is being anyone who's not white. And of course, it wasn't just race and sex which were markers of oppressed status. To quote, in addition to white racial identity, defenders singled out assigned inherited moral attributes to pupils who fell into male, that's a bad thing, heterosexual, that's bad, and Christian religious categories, that's bad. They're intrinsically oppressive. Intrinsically oppressive. The petition contends that, the petition in this, and I'm reading for this article in commentary, petition contends that critical race theory curriculum puts students like Clark, a mixed-race boy, being raised in a Christian household, in, quote, a deliberately designed, psychologically abusive dilemma, participate in the exercise in violation of his own conscience, and be branded with a pejorative label, or conscientiously refrain from participating and suffer isolation from his classmates and be maligned by the same labeling regardless. This oppressor shaming was compulsory, part of class. Now, this stuff is everywhere. It's spreading. It's often linked to the 1619 Project, which is trying to label the United States as inherently not a democracy, but a slaveocracy, certainly not a republic, certainly not individual rights. And it is everywhere. And the good news in this one, yeah, 3 cheers for this mother, absolutely, Mitch, is that somebody sued them. Somebody stood up to these bastards. And until we stand up to these bastards, until we stand up and say no, until we sue them, until we make them pay, until we shame them in public for this garbage that is presented as social sciences, this racist garbage, which is presented as anti-racist, but is actually the institutionalization of racism, it will continue. Voices have to be raised. We must speak up. We must talk about it and fight it and challenge it and sue and tell them to go to hell and not change our logos. Fight, fight, fight. And if we don't, we'll only have ourselves to blame. Who's defending them? Nobody's defending them. Ken, as usual, is distorting my views and creating straw man, as he always does. But he keeps coming back to listen to my show in spite of his lack of respect. All right, let's see. All right, Shali, finally got to your question. Okay. If a new religion arose in a free nation, preaching hatred of said nation and radicalizing its adherents to commit atrocities, generally break the law and infringe on right, would it be government's job to stop that religion? Yes, in the context of inciting for violence, in the context of undermining the rule of law, in the context of sending people out to do bad. So the government would not be attacking the ideas of the religion. The government would be attacking the manifestation of the religion that were rights violating and rule of law breaking. Oh, I see. So the only way to fight the left is to pretend that you won the election, to spread, this is according to Ken, to spread falsehoods, arbitrary ideas, made up garbage, is the only way to actually fight the left. Because you can't beat them intellectually. You can't actually argue against them. You can't actually present ideas that are better than theirs. You can't actually convince people that they are wrong. You have to stoop to their level. That is to lie and pretend and invent and make up, ignore the rule of law, ignore the courts, ignore the Constitution. So the only way to defeat the left is by using their methods. The only way to defeat the left is to abandon freedom, abandon individual rights, embrace authoritarianism, embrace totalitarianism, reject the American experiment, reject the Founding Fathers. Ah, there he goes. Ken says, we're no longer in the argument phase. That's right. So I'm expecting Ken with his M16 to be out in the streets, and I expect him to be launching the revolution. Of course, Ken, like all of these people who think that we are no longer in the argument stage, come to my chat and to other people's chat and argue. But I don't see them launching the revolution. I don't see them taking up weapons and going out there. They're full of it. Full of it. So I don't buy it. I don't buy that we're past the stage of argument. I don't buy that even if we were past the stage of argument, there's anything to be done about it. Or that a revolution is a solution given the state of the country, given who would win that revolution. And never is lying, cheating, stealing, pretending, advocating for the arbitrary a good idea. Well, you and those guys can start your revolution. You're not going to get very far. You're not going to get very far. And I doubt that any of us would want to live in the world created by such a revolution. What will Russell Brand's type evolve into? What's the next thing to tear down? Well, the next thing to tear down is the same as the next thing Ken wants to tear down. The next thing to tear down is political freedom. Just like Ken says, argument hasn't worked. We haven't gotten anywhere with argument, so we have to tear it down. What they're going to say is, we haven't been able to convince people that climate change needs action. We haven't been able to convince people that we need to massively redistribute wealth. We haven't been being able to convince people. Time for argumentation is over. What we need now is just to force them to do it. What we need now is violence. What we need now is authoritarianism. Again, nobody's defending, Ken says, Howard Roark would rather die than defend them. Nobody's defending them. I'm defending the truth. Howard Roark would die rather than lie, rather than pretend, rather than live the arbitrary and speak the arbitrary. You are the liars, pretending the election was stolen. That is pretend. That is lying. You want a revolution, and go and engage in revolution. Don't lie about it. Write a Declaration of Independence and go and do it. In what way are Europeans more enlightened than Americans? I don't think they are. I mean, they are in some ways. I mean, so I would consider them more enlightened with regard to religion. They're not religious, so even if they are a little religious, they're much more skeptical about religion than Americans. I think that's the only way in which they're more enlightened. I mean, the other thing is they have a great appreciation for the arts, for great art. for great painting, sculpture, the classical music, and things like that. So at least they used to. Right? So, but other than that, I don't think they are enlightened. Now, the left wants to believe that they're enlightened because the Europeans are far more leftists than Americans are. Europeans are dominantly left, and the left in the United States views their ideas as enlightened ideas. And therefore they view Europe as an enlightened continent because it's more to the left than America. It's more socialist than America. It's more collectivist than America. And since they view those ideas as enlightened, they will claim Europeans are more enlightened. But in an objective sense, objectively, they're not. They're not enlightened. You know, in many respects, they are. Well, I mean, they're much more further along with the impact of German philosophy. They're far further along in how bad they are philosophically, ideologically, politically. They're far more collectivist. They're far, you know, and they are far more socialist. They're far more egalitarian. They're far less ambitious. So there's no real objective sense in which Europeans are more enlightened than Americans. Except the two I gave, religion and art. Art. Yeah, calling them, yeah, okay. Do companies keep starting wages low so their workers can qualify for government benefits, therefore creating less market pressure for them to raise salaries? No, there's no evidence of that. And imagine if that were true. Imagine if companies were starting salaries low so that the workers could qualify for government benefits, and that way there'd be no, and let's say I wanted the best workers. So let's say they were paying them minimum wage, $7, $7.25, but the worker could really produce at 15. And let's say I was a competitor to those companies. And I wanted to get all their best workers. So I would offer all their workers $10. And those workers would leave and come to work for me for $10. And somebody else would notice, wait, he's paying them $10, but they actually produce at 15. So Daniel would start a business, and he would offer them $11. And then Wanda Freeman would start a business, and he would offer them $12. And their wages would rise until they actually earned what they produce. Or not what they produce, but they earned that level, right, that reflected their productive ability. So that they maxed out where the employer could make money off of them. But how much money he makes off of them is to a large extent determined by the competitive process in the market. And the competitive process would drive wages up if workers were more productive. Now, indeed, what happened, and this is exactly what Henry Ford did. Henry Ford at some point doubled the wages in his plant. And by doing that, he attracted workers from all the other auto manufacturers, but the best workers. And he indeed laid off the least productive workers in his own plant and replaced them with the most productive workers. And raised wages to match their productivity. Now, the other thing capitalists do is as you introduce machines, better processes, more efficiency, the workers become more productive. That's when their wages rise. So wages are linked to productivity. And if somebody's earning a lot less than what he's producing, then he'll switch jobs. Somebody will take advantage of that. How come you don't see nearly the same levels of homelessness in South Florida as you do in Southern California? That's a good question. I'm going to guess that the benefits accrued to homeless people in Southern California, not just in Southern California, in San Francisco especially, are far greater than they are in Southern Florida. So homeless people are going to gravitate to the place where they can get the most benefit, both weather-wise, in that sense, South Florida and Southern Florida are similar, but more importantly, in terms of the goodies that the government is handing out. And the goodies that the government's handing out are far more in South Florida. But there's actually another reason for that. And that is that it's much more likely that Californian will become homeless because rents are going up and the cost of housing is going up. The amazing thing about Florida, South Florida, Chris, thank you. That is great. That is very, very generous. Housing prices are going up constantly in California. Rents are going up constantly in California. And therefore, they keep pricing out whole segments of the population. Some of those people leave California. Some of those people don't have anywhere to go and land up being homeless. Now, why don't rents go up constantly in Florida? Why don't housing prices go up constantly in Florida? The reason is that in Florida they build. Florida has far looser regulations on building. It's far easier. There's a lot less not in my backyard. There's a lot more high-rises. There's just a lot more construction. There's a lot more building. And if you match demand with supply, prices stay stable. It's only when you can't keep up with demand that prices go up. And in California, there are massive restrictions on building, massive restrictions on construction. You can't build low-income housing because it's so regulated. The cost of housing is going to be high no matter what. And all of that leads to the fact that there are fewer homeless in South Florida. Chris writes, thank you, Ron, for the show a few weeks ago about objectivism, the philosophy of love. It was, that was the Valentine's Day one. That's great. It was a new way of looking at it for me and applicable to my life, rather than just using it to look at others or the world around me. Excellent. I'll do more shows like that. A lot of people responded very favorably to the Valentine's Day episode. I've been using this idea of objectivism as the philosophy of love for a long time, and I need to talk more about it and articulate more about what I mean. And generally, I think it's so important that this idea of the main role of the philosophy is to focus on yourself and improve yourself and benefit yourself and make your own life better. That is the most important thing. That's what the philosophy is about. Politics is a secondary issue. Cultural commentary is a secondary issue. And it's amazing to me how many of my kind of top supporters are from Australia. It really is interesting. It's interesting getting how many people excited about these ideas are living in Australia. All right, I have been listening to your past podcasts. I was let down with your one about conglomerates, Jeff Immelt. I'd like to hear a more in-depth critique. Well, now's not the time, because by saying it's in-depth, you would want more information. But you can find a more in-depth critique in my course in defense of financial markets, which is on YouTube. It's available for free on YouTube. It's a multi-series. If you go to the playlist called courses, you'll find a course in defense of financial markets, and I go in depth there. The other place that I talk about it in more depth is a course called Decorporation, where I talk about corporations, what they are, how they function, what they do, and you can find it there. But yeah, I stand by everything I said about conglomerates and about what I said about Jeff Immelt. I think Jeff Immelt, and you can see it in the stock performance of General Electric, was a terrible CEO. And I think conglomerates generally, with rare exceptions, and there are exceptions, I acknowledge, but they're very rare, are a very, very bad idea for shareholders. They're not wealth maximizing. They're not a good way to run a business. But you can find my more in-depth critique, and of course, I'm happy to do a whole show on this if somebody would sponsor it. You find those critiques in Defense of Financial Markets and The Corporation, those two episodes, those two courses. Should the financial news media know better than attacking billionaires, or are they innocently stupid? No, they should know better. They should know better. They're financial journalists. They should have studied economics and finance. They should know how you become a billionaire. They should know about these things. Speaking of space, did you see the movie First Man? Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, First Man was very good. I liked it a lot. It shows, like most survival kind of movies, people, Robinson Crusoe type of movies, it shows how man can use his mind to survive in the most extreme circumstances. I thought some of it extended beyond belief. Some of it was a little silly, but overall, I thought it portrayed a real hero and somebody who used his mind to save his own life and in a heroic way. So I thought that was really positive. So yeah, a movie I enjoyed. Have you ever heard the Spice Girls music? If so, what are your thoughts? I mean, yeah, but I think it's shallow, not very interesting, not very sophisticated. Yeah, very joyous, very happy, but shallow. Very, very, very shallow. When will we be able to see the Mackey debate? I wish I knew. I thought it would be out last Friday. So any day now. Any day now. Thank you, Jeremy. We should be able to get the Mackey debate any day now. As soon as it's up, I'll be tweeting and put it on Facebook and stuff. It'll be on Reason TV, but I'll put it on my channel as well. I was debating a leftist online, and I eventually discovered the one thing which placed a seed of doubt in his mind. He was unwilling or unable to define justice. Yeah, they can't. Justice to them is equality. And yet, do they really want everybody to get the same grade, even though some people know the material and some people don't? So when pushed, they don't want to completely embrace this idea of equality. They can't really get their arms around it. So, all right, I'm going to leave that question to the last. What do you think of the potential COVID vaccine passport? I like it. I like the fact that if you're vaccinated, which means you're unlikely to get it, the probability of getting it is low, but the probability of giving it to other people is very, very low. So you should be able to fly without a mask. You should be able to enter countries without worries. So you should be able to do things that maybe other people, private organizations, should be able to restrict you from doing. And in a world in which the government is restricting us from traveling and from going places and from entering certain countries, it's a good idea to figure out, some people should be allowed into the country. Now, I believe it, they shouldn't have these restrictions, or at least they shouldn't have them without, they could require tests, but not much more than that. But given the state of the world right now, I'd like to see them discriminate. You're right. I think you're thinking of The Martian. First Man is about the moon landing. I did not see First Man. Sorry. Yes, you're right. First Man was about Neil Armstrong. I want to see it. I was told I should really see it in the theaters, but I want to see it. I will see it once I have my new home theater set up in my new condo, which I hope I'm buying this week. If Banco Popular comes through with a mortgage, I will be proud owner of a fantastic new condominium here in Puerto Rico. But I'm until that happens, and then I'll have the new office, I'll have the green screen, I'll have new equipment. The show will get, in that sense, much better. So yeah. What do you think of? So I'm all for the vaccine passport in the world in which we live. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to come to much because, again, egalitarianism won't let people treat people differently. So what if you got a vaccine? Why should I treat you differently than somebody who hasn't? The fact that I own property would be a strike against me, along with the fact that I'm white male. Yeah, in this world. Thoughts on Andrew Breitbart? I mean, I thought Andrew Breitbart was mixed. I thought some of the stuff he did was very courageous and very interesting, and I thought he pushed the envelope on some issues that were good. It was sad that he died at such a young age. It would have been interesting to see how he would have dealt with the Trump era. Some believe he would have become Trump's biggest cheerleader. Others have different views, but I think he would have. But so I'm mixed about Andrew. I thought, again, that some of the things he did were interesting and pushed the envelope from a journalistic perspective in an interesting way. Jeremy says, First Man is my favorite movie. I'm really curious to see it, so I will at some point watch it. I want to make sure I have a good sound system to benefit from the special effects. All right, this is spoilers. This is why I left this for last. They are Atlas Shrugged spoilers. So if you've not read Atlas Shrugged, you might want to mute your mic or just say goodbye. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Don't forget to like the show before you leave, but I don't want to, I'm warning you about Atlas Shrugged spoilers. There is a certain similarity between how Dominique destroys her values, or how Winan keeps us hidden away, and the way Galt draws all productive people to Galt's Gulch. Is the only difference that Galt has a positive goal direction and they are destroying theirs, or is there more to it? It's an interesting question. I've never thought about it like that. Can I do this? Who asked this question? Let's see if I can find out who asked the question. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to answer it. But I am going to put it with my Atlas Shrugged questions. So either, what day is it today? Today's Tuesday. So we're going to have a show on Thursday and probably on Friday. So one of those shows is going to be on Atlas Shrugged. I will advertise in advance which one. And I have added that to my list of Atlas Shrugged questions. And that'll also give me time to think about the answer. So there will be a show this week, sponsored by Troy from Australia, on Atlas Shrugged. And let's just say it's going to be Friday. So Friday's show, 7 p.m. East Coast time, is going to be on Atlas Shrugged. And I've got quite a few questions on Atlas Shrugged. Anybody who has any other Atlas Shrugged questions, welcome to send them in. You can email them to me at yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. You can, of course, super chat them during the show. But please come armed with whatever Atlas Shrugged questions you have. But I will be doing a whole show on Atlas Shrugged on Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will be sponsored by Troy. So encourage you all to join me. Next show will be on Thursday, 2 days from now. Hope you join me then. I will, of course, let you know when the debate with John Mackey is available on video. And I bid you all have a great night, and I will see you all on Thursday. And don't forget to like the show before you leave. Share the show with your friends, family, anybody. And help us get subscriptions up. We got to get more subscribers. Help us get subscriptions up. Daniel says he'll give me $20 if he'll match $20 if I do a show from the ocean, from the beach, with the ocean view behind me. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll have to work on that one. That will require Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, you're just not going to get as good a reception. Much more complicated than you think to do a show from the beach. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your